speak about... Sorry? No, it does, actually. Okay. So, my paper is entitled More Than the Sum of Its Parts, a Pro-Conciliar Afterthought on the Need of Critical Engagement. In the aftermath of the 2016 Holy and Great Council of the Orthodox Church in Crete, Orthodox public opinion, if we can say that, concentrates mainly around two extremes: a fierce rejection of the Council by self-professed guardians of Orthodoxy on the one hand, and an equally fierce yet wholesale defense of the Council on the other. What seems to be still lacking, in spite of serious attempts at remedying this, is an internal critical engagement with the Council, that is, a consideration of it on the basis of its affirmation as a legitimate and important, as a holy and great Council of the Church. The present paper tries to shed further light on the need for this afterthought. It must be said, however, that it was written prior to Metropolitan Callistos' keynote address, which is precisely that, an internal critical engagement with the Council. So this must be seen as a footnote to that keynote speech, practically. So first, while the Council of Crete does not claim ecumenical status, it is certainly, or was certainly proposed as the next big thing, as it were, since the Seventh Ecumenical Council, or at the very latest, the Hesychast Councils of the 14th century. However, back then, the Orthodox world had a largely functional pentarchy, or in the latter case, tetrarchy. Thus, the title of patriarchate would bear a particular semantic content. Today, we face a very different situation in which some national churches have archdioceses and some national churches have patriarchates. The difference between those two categories, beyond its purely honorific and diptychs-related nature, is currently opaque, as is the ecclesiological significance of that difference, should there be one. It is worth asking if the Orthodox Church takes on the responsibility to convene a council with such claims to importance. Shouldn't the ecclesiological and organizational difference between then and now be at the very least addressed at the appropriate level? This point on patriarchates, etc., is often addressed by Christos Giannarassi in Greece. So, two, what does it entail for Orthodox ecclesiology that the national autocephalous churches, rather than the persons of bishops, if we restrict council attendance with voting rights to bishops, were on the receiving end of the council's invitations in order for them to attend the council under their primate with an equal number of vote-bearing participating bishops? Can this arrangement form a basis for the Church's future? How can a federation of self-governing Orthodox churches ecclesiology, so often professed in certain quarters, be avoided at the level of the organization and convocation of a large council so that it reflects an ecclesiology circumscribing one Orthodox church rather than an Orthodox communion, as it were? An oft-cited internal criticism of the Council concerns precisely this, the decision to invite autocephalous churches with an equal number of bishops and advisors. While the arguments against the obvious alternative, that is, either of inviting every bishop on earth or of admitting a number of representatives that would be analogous to each autocephalous church's quantitative strength, while the arguments against those alternatives are easy to surmise and perhaps to agree with, this by itself does not make the route taken correct. This route has two implications. First, that it is unhesitantly accepted that today's Orthodox Church, which purports to be the una sancta, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, is comprised of national autocephalous churches, which are the Church's units, as it were. While steps have been taken to recognize the diaspora problem as an ecclesiological anomaly, nothing of the sort has been done at the level discussed here. Thus, the Council of Crete conciliarly celebrated the organization of the Church at the national autocephalous level, rather than conciliarly voicing any second thoughts about this relatively recent historical development. And secondly, in spite of the fact that theoretically we had a one bishop, one vote system at the Council, it is easy to discern that the vote-bearing units of the Council, as it were not persons, bishops, but rather organizational structures, autocephalous churches. This has been highlighted and underscored by Metropolitan Callistos. Delegations, not bishops, were the units comprising the Council. Thus, we speak of 14 invited churches and 10 attending churches, not of so many invited bishops and that many attending bishops. Should we be enthusiastic about this novel corporate conciliar ecclesiology, irrespective of whether we would equally be enthusiastic about its obvious alternative. Why is this a problem? It seems, to me at the very least, that a crucial part of the ecclesiology of conciliarity lies in the assertion that in council, the Church is disclosed as being substantially more than the sum of its parts. That is, a reality is manifested and disclosed in an ecclesial council that is not to be found in the opinion and testimony of individual persons and bishops, however many of them. A reality that allows the council to speak on behalf of the Church and on behalf of truth. It seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us. Neither is the council merely an aggregate and sum of bishops as representatives of local churches, nor is a majoritarian ideology at the core of the theology of conciliarity. To illustrate this point, I invite you to ponder at how inconceivable a proposal would be, according to which ecclesial councils can or should be substituted with bishop polls in order to trace the most popular opinion on any given matter among bishops. The event of the council itself is understood as a reality of a different nature. It is not a convocation of a board of directors. The irony here lies in the fact that important advances in 20th century theology, advances that are dynamically endorsed by the ecumenical patriarchate at the theological level, were negated and put aside at this historic council. In the particular context discussed here, I'm referring to first the Eucharistic importance of the bishop as witness of his local church, and not of units of autocephalous churches, and two, of a non-nationalistic ecclesiology, as well, three, as of a distinctive conciliar theology. In order to avoid woeful organizational alternatives, it has been decided that this historic council should embody in its preparation and conception theological principles very different from those celebrated advances as enshrined in the participating autocephalous churches model. Given that the Holy and Great Council of Crete proposed this model for convoking a pan-Orthodox council in the third millennium, there one proposed that it might perhaps be a felix culpa that for all the wrong reasons, a full pan-Orthodox participation which would grant immense future authority to the model, not only to the council, has not been proven possible. Three, which are the burning problems of the Orthodox Church today, and how far have these been addressed in the context of the council's agenda, and why? What should be the nature of council encyclicals and messages today? Are there any dangers in convoking a great council for the resolution of non-doctrinal issues? A recurring point of discussion on the council concerns the question whether it addressed the burning problems of the Church. Instead of engaging with this question, I would like to formulate a more general one. What should a pan-Orthodox council decide about? Many would like the Orthodox Church to speak with one voice and take an explicit stance on important current issues, in a way comparable to the Roman Catholic Church's practice, and of the Pope's practice largely, of regularly issuing authoritative statements that are binding in different degrees for the whole of the Church, or even in a way comparable to that of international organizations like the UN. However, it is important to note that historically, non-local councils, that is quite literally and etymologically ecumenical councils, would only be convoked due to grave doctrinal problems of such a magnitude that one of the outcomes of ecumenical councils would be precisely schism with those, however many or few, that would disagree with its resolutions. One hopes that such schisms are not on contemporary councils' to-do list. And most importantly, such historical councils would issue absolutely minimal resolutions, resolutions that would form the lowest possible common denominator for church unity. It is telling, for example, that the council that recognized St. Maximus the Confessor's Diothelite Christological position as official and exclusive church doctrine, the Sixth Ecumenical Council, would not name the confessor in its resolutions, presumably due to his name and memory still being divisive and controversial 20 years after his repose. So it's the absolutely minimal resolutions. Many of us would like the Church to endorse with one conciliar voice positions on a host of issues, positions that to our eyes would be the only ones making sense from an Orthodox Christian ecclesial perspective. Yet it is important to note that the historical experience of Grand Council is in stark contrast with such a wish, or rather it is precisely the opposite one. Thus, prior to asking whether a council has addressed burning questions or not, one should first ask whether such questions are indeed pan-Orthodox council material. And the fact that historically ecumenical councils could be convoked only for grave doctrinal issues and end up in schism is an important caveat, I think. 4. A short note on a follow-up issue. Conciliarity has been introduced to the Council in the hope of future regular conciliar meetings. Theoretically, this would seem to contradict the previous assertion on the nature of pan-Orthodox councils. However, it is indeed and unavoidably true that we are in dire need of enhanced conciliarity in practice, particularly at the pan-Orthodox level, as recent events woefully underscored. What I would like to stress is that we should be acutely aware of the difference between much-needed regular councils to know us better, as it were, councils for greater collaboration and mutual love between the churches, and councils that would claim to continue the trajectory of first millennium ecumenical councils. These are two very different types of conciliarity. Both of them are desperately needed, particularly the first one, but remaining aware of their difference is crucial in order not to create more problems than one would solve. Just to illustrate an example, today many autocephalous churches can be both in communion with the Ecumenical Patriarchate and with Moscow, perhaps by voicing certain disagreements on Ukraine, but still being in communion with both. However, the moment a next pan-Orthodox council is convened, where the primate of Ukraine will be present, then autocephalous churches will not be able to come, some of them, because by coming they would have to accept the primate of Ukraine. So one sees how the convocation of a pan-Orthodox council in the future might prove to be a source of problems than solutions. Concomitant to the previous observation is the one on the nature of primacy in the context of a pan-Orthodox council. During the first millennium, for better or worse, the emperor of the Christian ecumeny would play a role that, by definition, is not around to play anymore. As we poignantly saw during 2016 and afterwards, that the first among equals is to play that role in this new era of ours by convening the council and presiding at it is an interpretation and claim, one I agree with, but an interpretation and claim, not a self-evident truth. Were the council to have been successfully pan-Orthodox, this would have set an important precedent that, again, for better or worse, has not materialized. In the preparation of future councils, we Orthodox would do good to see the precise nature of primacy in the council, not generally, as a question to be further explored and explicitly agreed upon, rather than as a response already given with thinking that some people simply do not accept it. It's an open question, be that as it may. 6, and last point, apart from the question of attendance itself, and controversy surrounding the Holy and Great Council of the Orthodox Church, mainly centered on self-professed anti-ecumenists, harshly criticizing it as an ecumenist council. This was due to the council resolutions employing a terminology of churches vis-à-vis, for example, the Roman Catholic Church, in spite of this being centuries-old standard historical practice for the Orthodox Church, as has been demonstrated quite forcefully. Critics saw in this an undermining of the certainty that the Orthodox Church is the Creed's one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and an indirect adoption of the Brown's theory or of the invisible church theory in ecclesiology. What I would like to demonstrate is that perhaps counterintuitively, and certainly in spite of all the positive and constructive elements of that historic council, the Holy and Great Council of Crete has to be considered an anti-ecumenist council in an unprecedented way. This is the case because for the first time in Orthodox history, as far as I can tell, a Grand Council of such proportions declared that the particular sum of local churches, patriarchates, archdioceses, dioceses, etc., that we term the Orthodox Church, claims to be the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. There is nuance in this distinction. Through its terminology, the Council of Crete did not declare that particular theological doctrines are orthodox, correct, and ecclesial, and that the ones rejecting them are not on the right path, which would be not uncommon in church history. For example, the Hesychast councils of the 14th century. Rather than that, the council explicitly declared that the Orthodox Church, that particular body which was represented in this council, is the Una Sancta. I copy from the Relations of the Orthodox Church with the Rest of the Christian World document. The Orthodox Church, as the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, in her profound ecclesiastical self-consciousness, believes unflinchingly that she occupies a central place in the matter of the promotion of Christian unity in the world today. This is, as it were, an organizational rather than doctrinal exclamation. It defines ecclesial bodies, not doctrines and theology, as the Una Sancta. Again, such a conciliar claim is, to my eyes, unprecedented in Orthodox history. But let me start by the admission that the Orthodox Church understands itself as speaking its truth in councils, provided that these are subsequently accepted by the faithful and that they acquire an exalted status in the Church's consciousness in the long run. This means 5, 2, or no minutes? Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, splendid. Neither an elder nor the monastic communities, because, for example, there were documents by Mount Athos that declared that the Orthodox Church is the Una Sancta. But these are documents by Mount Athos, not by a Grand Council. So neither an elder, nor the monastic communities, nor a saint who is not infallible, not tradition in itself as the mere passage of time, nor any local or not well-received synod may raise a claim of uttering the truth of the Church. So during the first millennium and its major Christological heresies, the Church has manifested itself conciliarly on numerous occasions, defining herself and her boundaries. Thus, the Church and Arians external to her emerged during the first ecumenical councils, in which Arians participated. The Church and Nestorians external to her emerged out of the third ecumenical councils, in which Nestorians participated, and so on. After 325 AD, when this was conclusively settled, it was clear to the Church's consciousness that Arians are external to the one Church. After 431, it was clear that Nestorians lie beyond the Una Sancta, and so on. However, nothing of the sort has ever taken place as far as the Catholics are concerned. There was no council of ecumenical validity where both Orthodox and Catholics would participate, and out of which, from an Orthodox perspective, the Church and Catholics external to it would emerge. So this claim has not been conciliarly formulated in any way prior to Crete. Interestingly, the problem here is not whether one is ecumenically open to Roman Catholics or not. The problem is that by identifying the Una Sancta with the Orthodox Church and excluding Catholics in error from it, we have to identify when exactly the one holy Catholic or Catholic and Apostolic Church was engendered or defined as such. In which council? As said above, we can pinpoint when exactly the Arians were excluded. We can pinpoint when the Nestorians were excluded. But the Catholics? Since every Orthodox liturgy depends on the recitation of the Creed, the symbol of the faith, it is of cardinal, pun intended, importance for us to know which is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church we believe in. And, excluding Crete for a second, prior to Crete, if we claim that this is identified with the particular sum of the Orthodox ecclesial bodies, then we do not draw our creedal witness and definition of the one Church from the conciliarly articulated voice of the Church, but rather from our particular convictions formed by our interpretations of the sayings of particular elders or saints, or of perhaps many individual bishops or primates, our view of theologumena, and from the innovation that being in an error not dealt by an ecumenical council, automatically retraces the borders of the Una Sancta. Of course, one can be in error, but it's not automatic. It's not an automatic procedure. This is ecclesiologically dangerous. It is the individual doxe appropriating the voice of the Holy Spirit. It opens the door to a legion of private ecclesiologies, with each faithful by him or herself defining the Church in a different manner on this or that basis. So for the Orthodox to be orthodox rather than a modern invention, it is necessary to maintain an ecclesiology of the schism in which, until further notice and in view of a future council, the Una Sancta is where the last ecumenical council left it, in spite of the pending nature of potentially very serious doctrinal errors of groups within it. Precisely due to their dire nature, these are to be resolved by a properly executed ecumenical councils, not by you and me. However, all this changed in Crete. The Holy and Great Council of the Orthodox Church, raising the claim of speaking for the whole of the Orthodox Church, conciliarly defined for the first time the Una Sancta as identical to the particular sum and organization of ecclesial dioceses and communities we name the Orthodox Church. This is unavoidably an anti-ecumenist gesture of historical proportions. Whether this normative declaration will forge a new and exclusive ecclesiology for the Orthodox now depends on the reception of the Council by the people on a pan-Orthodox level. However, it still remains the case that we still lack the way doctrinal disputes were resolved in the first millennium ecumenical councils, that is, by joint councils. In our case, a council where both would participate is pending, either in order to solidify the schism or to heal it. I have submitted the above points to your consideration in the hope that they help illustrate how the convocation and realization of the Holy and Great Council was the beginning rather than the end of a path towards renewed conciliarity. And it also served as an opportunity to formulate pressing questions rather than provide definitive answers. Thank you.